Last video, I showed you all the woodworking involved in building this Bluetooth boombox. In this video, we're going to put a finish on it.
My name is Justin, and I build my own speakers. In a previous video, I cut out all of the pieces for this project and routed out some holes in the baffle for the speakers and the car stereo that's going to power this project. Here I'm using some corner clamps to get everything lined up before I start gluing everything together. I'm going to fix the baffle to the bottom first. Now that everything's lined up perfectly, I'm going to lay this thing on its side and release the corner clamps and slide out the bottom piece and slather it up with glue and then slide it right back in. These particular corner clamps are real handy to use this way. It lets you line everything up perfect, and then after you've got it all set up, you can apply the glue and start clamping things down. These corner clamps aren't perfect for a glue up. You really want to put on some bar clamps along with it so you can get some good glue squeeze out. Here's a money-saving tip if you happen to have kids. Whenever they outgrow their clothes, you can use their old socks to wipe up glue on your projects. No point in giving that to Goodwill where they're just going to go to waste. You can use it out here on your projects. So we're going to put some bar clamps on this thing and get it ready to go. Typically, I like to use brad nails and wood glue to hold everything together. I'll give you a link to my brad nailer that I like to use. In this particular case, I decided to just simply glue and clamp everything together for a couple of reasons. The first one being that I didn't want any tool marks or marks from the brad nail in the baffle. I built a project earlier and left some marks in the baffle from my brad nailer, and they didn't just look quite right. I'll give you a link to that project here as well so you can see it. And the other reason why is because it was really hot on this particular day, and in this kind of heat, wood glue is going to set up in 30 minutes with no problem. This type of wood glue will set in 30 minutes, and as long as you don't put any stress on the joint for 24 hours, it'll hold forever and be stronger than the wood. Whenever I'm working on a project like this, and there's a lot of time sitting around waiting for the wood glue to dry, I always like to find something else to do whenever I'm not clamping everything down. Cleaning up around the shop, building another part of the build. In this particular case, I had to design and lay out some crossovers, and I'll put together a video on that as well. And when I have that video up, I'll make sure I'll give you a link here in this video so you can see the crossover build. The key here is to try not to waste any time whenever you're in those glue up time periods. Maybe glue up, take a break for lunch, go get a drink of water because it's so hot outside. And if you do that, the 30-minute in between clamping and gluing and removing the clamps and setting everything up really isn't all that bad. At this point in the build, I'm going to be gluing on the sides. So here I'm clamping the side piece to the front baffle, and then I'm going to put another clamp and clamp it down. Not using any corner clamps this time because I don't have a corner clamp that can fit into this real tight spot. So I'm just going to use my bar clamps and clamp everything down. You'll notice that the workpiece is trying to fall over because of this heavy bar clamp I'm putting on it. So you got to be strategic about the clamps. You clamp down to the work surface or put another clamp at a different angle so it'll lean a different direction and things like that. Another advantage of working in this kind of heat is that the glue will start to grab really fast. As you can see, one of my clamps fell off as I was trying to reposition the next one, and the workpiece stayed in place. It didn't move. I was able to line it up and get it back to where it belongs. And now I'm going to put a clamp down so that my workpiece will stay where it belongs here. Now it's just a matter of going through and clamping in all of the pieces. Now the glue is dry and it's time to pull off the clamps and start the next part of the build. So now I'm going to install the dividers in the box. These dividers are going to separate the chambers where the speakers are from the chamber where the car stereo is going to be sitting. And this is an important pro tip. I went ahead when I was making all my cuts earlier in the previous video and I made this spacer. And the idea behind this spacer is now I can accurately place that divider in the exact right spot without having to do any cutting, any measuring, or anything like that. It's a real simple way to make sure you're putting everything together correctly without much thought or work or anything like that. You just put the spacer down and then stick your divider in, clamp that thing down, and move on to the next side. Now that the spacers are done, the next thing to do is to affix the top of the enclosure. Now this top piece is going to be the very last piece that I glue on permanently. I'm going to leave the back detachable. The plan is to put some speaker gasket tape around the back and then bolt the back to the rest of the enclosure so that I can easily take the back off for access to the crossovers and all the wiring internally, simply because poking crossovers and wires through these little tiny 3-inch and 1.65-inch speaker holes is going to be a serious pain in the rear. So I just follow my usual procedure, which is just to slather everything up with glue, and I'm going to put some glue on the edge of the top, put some glue on the sides and the 2 dividers, and I'm just going to clamp this thing down. Now that I have the bulk of the enclosure assembled, it's time to try to make it look nice. So I'm going to bust out the sander and I'm going to start sanding. Basically what I need to do on the tops and bottoms and sides is sand off any rough edges from the glue up procedure. And the front of the baffle, I've got to take some time and be very careful with this because I've got to sand off any glue that's left over, make sure all that glue residue is gone, because when I stain this, it's going to show up. So the sanding will take a few minutes, but I'm going to fast forward through most of it. I'm all done here and that front baffle is smooth as silk. Now it's time to start staining that front baffle. So I've taken some masking tape and I've taped off the sides of the enclosure so I don't accidentally get some stain on the sides. And then I've put some pre-stain conditioner down and I'm wiping it off here with an old t-shirt. Next, I'm going to grab my stain. I honestly forget what kind of stain I used. It was some kind of Minwax that I had just laying around, and I wiped the stain onto the enclosure. Now, you can't really tell because it's a very light stain. There's a very slight difference if you look at the sides versus the top of the enclosure, but when I put the black carbon fiber vinyl on this thing, it's really going to pop. I'm going to cover the rest of the enclosure with this black carbon fiber material. It's pretty easy to work with. You just cut it to the approximate size, peel the back off, and stick it on. Here's a tip. Don't peel the back off the entire piece. Peel the back off kind of as you go so you don't end up sticking someplace you don't want to. And then after I've placed it where I need it and pressed down on it, I just simply trim it with a razor knife. Very easy to work with, and I think it looks really nice. And here's what the finished product is going to look like. I've still got to wire everything up internally and connect the woofers. I've gone ahead and flush mounted the tweeters. So this thing is getting really close to being finished.
Now that we've got everything assembled and we got a finish on the box, it's time to move on to the next step. And that's going to be the crossovers. If you'll go ahead and hit subscribe, there'll be another video coming up within a week that shows that crossover network and how it all went together. Thank you so much for watching.